Previously, in our series of From Daniel to the Sunday Law, we spoke about the identifying marks of prophecy in relation to how it affects us today. We identified that there was a dream given to King Nebuchadnezzar which, interpreted, was kingdoms which were to rule in their time period up until the time when Jesus Christ comes to reign in his kingdom upon the earth. And this is also proven based on the fact that we were told that these events of prophecy were to affect us in the latter days, which we know to be the last days. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. We also came to the conclusion that based on the succession of these powers, the power that is currently reigning is right down in the toes of iron and clay. And so the attention of the prophecy is obviously to be set in the events that are to transpire in the toes of iron and clay. These events are repeated and enlarged in the book of Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7 we saw 4 beasts, a lion with eagle's wings, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, a 4-headed leopard with wings, and a beast that was so dreadful that could not be described with 10 horns. Based upon the flow of prophecy, we saw that these were the same powers given with more information which was seen in Daniel chapter 2, which matches the historical references successfully. Now at this moment in time we do not have the time to go into these powers directly, but we encourage you to study these accounts carefully because it confirms history and the characteristics that the beasts connect these kingdoms to. For example, the 3rd beast, which represents Greece according to the 3rd successive kingdom which succeeded the Medes and the Persians, seen in the image of Daniel chapter 2, had their powers separated into 4 kingdoms from Alexander the Great. This is why, according to the beasts in Daniel chapter 7, this kingdom ended up with 4 heads. And according to history, the Bible is correct, for the 4 kingdoms that rose from Greece were the divided 4 generals of Alexander the Great after he died. And so with this understanding we can see that Daniel chapter 7 repeats and gives more information based upon the vision of Daniel chapter 2. But our attention for consideration, just as it was for Daniel's attention and consideration, was based upon the event of Daniel chapter 7 under the 4th beast, where we identified the identifying marks of the little horn power. And so those identifying marks are now set, for we know that the power, the little horn, reflects none other power but the Roman Catholic Church, the papal power. Now it must be said that this may come as a shock and a surprise to many, for many in the world are Roman Catholics, but some don't know about this history and especially this prophecy. But this is not to say that the people in the Catholic Church have the same spirit as the spirit of the Church. And so this is not to cause an offense to anyone, but to display the truth for one and all to accept or reject. But according to the mouth of Jesus Christ himself, he says in John chapter 8 verse 31 and 32, "Then said Jesus to the Jews which believed on him, If ye continue in my words, then are ye my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Though the truth may be hard to bear at times, more times than most, we must be willing to take on the hard sayings and embrace the truth. For there are many disciples in the time of Jesus Christ, when they heard some of these hard sayings, the hard truths, they did not follow Jesus Christ anymore. Many therefore of his disciples, when they heard this and said, "This is an hard saying, who can hear it?" When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples murmured at it. For that time many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. Then said Jesus unto the 12, "Will ye also go away?" That's the question for them, and that is also the question asked for us today, and that is also the question that must be answered by us today. For Daniel says in this dream as well as the vision in Daniel chapter 7 that the interpretation is sure. And so with the interpretation, we now head into the book of Revelation chapter 13, holding in mind the identifying marks of the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. For Revelation chapter 13 begins to repeat and enlarge. It is important to understand before we dissect the subject at hand the way prophecy is given and how it is to be interpreted. For the book of Revelation is a symbolic book given to unlock hidden meanings. In like manner, how Jesus said to Nicodemus that you must be born again, only to receive a responding question, how can a man be born again? Must he enter into his mother's womb? The spiritual meaning is not about going back inside your mother's womb, but dying to this world and being born again in a state of righteousness. It's about a change of mindset, living a life no more in death and destruction, but to live the life of purity, the life of eternity, the life of God. And so Jesus Christ expresses in his teachings in a way so that those who are open-minded and faithful will understand, and those who rely on the Holy Spirit to bring the truth will receive it and also share it. And it's because many people have come towards the Bible in a mindset that is unjust and biased that many people have asked questions based on their own human reasonings. They cannot understand the truth in this manner. The Muslim, for example, who believes Jesus is not God, will say, show me where in the Bible it says Jesus says, I am God, and worship me. When Jesus did not come to proclaim himself as God and to worship him, for he came in the form of a servant to be like us in order to save mankind. For it is man that sinned, not God. Although he was in the form of God and equal with God, he did not take advantage of this equality. Instead, he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, by becoming like other humans by having a human appearance. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, death on a cross. Or the atheist may say, if God is so good, why is there so much evil in the world? When the Bible again expresses that before sin, there was no evil in the world, and that cause of sin was through none other than Satan himself. The person who lives a sinful life belongs to the devil, because the devil has been committing sin since the beginning. The reason that the Son of God appeared was to destroy what the devil does. And so the principle of the book of Revelation is to let the Bible explain and interpret itself, so that the Bible is the key that unlocks Scripture. When it comes to the biblical account of prophecy, the prophecy is always shown in the time frame of the one who is writing the prophecy revealed. Daniel, for example, received the vision shown from Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2, as well as receiving the vision in Daniel chapter 7. The beginning of these chapters expresses the time when they were given, which means that these prophecies started in the period of Babylon. And as we've now head into John's day, we are to expect the same. For the time frame of the book of Revelation is around 95 AD. Now when we look back in time over the time frame of prophecy seen in the image of Daniel chapter 2, we know that this time frame is during the reign of the Roman Empire in its pagan state. So as we head into Revelation chapter 13, we can know that the time frame starts or continues from the legs of iron represented as Rome to the time when the kingdom of God is to be fully set up, the stone hitting the image and filling the entire earth. Every event between the legs of iron and the stone is vital for us to understand, for it affects us today. So let us allow the Bible to see how all of these events affects us today and what it means for each and every one of us today. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now from face value, many people may wonder, who is this power? For we remember that according to Daniel chapter 7, a beast represents a kingdom. And if you watch part 1, I'm sure you would remember that the same characteristics on this unknown beast seen here are the same in the book of Daniel chapter 7. For example, we see the leopard, we see the bear's feet, we see the mouth of a lion, and we see the 10 horns. Now why is this the case? As you study the characteristics of the prophets, whenever a prophecy was given, there was always another prophet to announce the termination of that prophecy. For example, in the book of Malachi, Malachi announces that the Messiah was to come. Before the Messiah came, there was another prophet to announce his arrival, which we know to be John the Baptist. In the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah gave a prophecy about the captivity of Israel, which was to terminate and that they would be allowed to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Daniel the prophet announced this as we read in Daniel chapter 9, in whom he also expresses the same account about Cyrus in the book of Isaiah. And so with this same pattern, we are to expect the same. Daniel announced the prophecy seen in Daniel chapter 7, which is to affect the last days. John, looking over the things that were written, sees in vision the things that are to come to pass in the last days, in which he is to write. The fulfillment of these events which are to affect us in the last or latter days. So why is it that John is seeing all of these characteristics? Well, it's simply the case of Daniel looking forward in time and John looking back in time. For the order from Daniel's point of view was first the lion, then the bear, then the leopards, then the beast which had 10 horns. From John's point of view, he starts with the 10 horns, then the leopard, then the bear, and then the lion, going back in time. So what we are seeing here is John looking back in time, giving us a historical confirmation as we now go into the characteristics of this beast, continuing from verse 4. Now I want to remind you of what we saw just before we finished part 1 in our subject. We saw that there was a little horn coming up out of the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7. The characteristics were confirmed that this power pointed to no other power but the Roman Catholic Church. But as we continue in Revelation chapter 13, I want you to notice some of these resemblances, for it will help us answer the question, who is the beast in Revelation chapter 13? And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? It is evident to know that whoever this beast is, we must understand that this is a satanic power, a power that Satan himself has ordained or given life. For the dragon, according to Revelation chapter 12, is the devil. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. For the Bible to tell us that they worshipped the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and then to see a transition in saying they worship the beast, we can understand that whatever this beast is, though people worship the beast, they are initially worshipping the dragon, Satan. Why? Because we are seeing a different phase of satanic power, a transition from the dragon to the beast. We saw this in verse 2 of Revelation chapter 13. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Essentially, what Revelation is saying is that the beast here is a puppet of the dragon that is pulling the strings. While everybody enjoys a good puppet show, the devil is the one making the movements to fulfill its overall purpose. This is why the Bible tells us that the dragon deceiveth the whole world. When one thinks of the devil today, what comes to mind? We usually think of symbols like an upside down cross, the symbol of Baphomet, a red goat with a tail and a pitchfork, or a burning beast with skin dropping off, seared off from the hot flames. Basically a horrible sight. And what this does is it cheapens the depth of the importance of the subject matter. For when we see symbols like this, though the Bible never expressed that the devil looks like this, we link it with other sci-fi fictions, fairy tales, and themes that come to point of saying that Satan doesn't exist. And how strange it is that with every debate of the Bible with famous atheists as well as theists, there is not one mention of Satan when it comes to the issue of existence or the world's deities. Rather, the issue is thrown back on God on why there's evil in the world and the topic of existence, while Satan hides in the background, simply because people are led to believe he doesn't exist. But this is all part of the plan of Satan as to what the Bible mentions about him. That being, he deceives the whole world to bring forth his agenda through the beast in Revelation chapter 13. In the book Great Controversy, it opens up and emphasizes the manner in which why Satan is actually allowing such things to happen. None are in greater danger from the influence of evil spirits than are those who, notwithstanding the direct and ample testimony of the scriptures, deny the existence and agency of the devil and his angels. So long as we are ignorant of their wiles, they have almost inconceivable advantage. Many give heed to their suggestions while they suppose themselves to be following the dictates of their own wisdom. This is why, as we approach the close of time, when Satan is to work with greatest power to deceive and destroy, he spreads everywhere the belief that he does not exist. It is his policy to conceal himself and his manner of working. So while he is concealed, as seen with the present examples, he is working with all wickedness to set us up for when the mark of the beast is to be enforced. Some are already deceived to think that the mark of the beast is a computer chip that is to be implanted in your hand, or a barcode that is to be stamped upon your forehead. And what that does again is cheapen the grand scale of things, which is simply the battle of righteousness and sin. We will cover this in our upcoming video. So with all this said, how is the devil going to deceive the entire world, though the world already created a picture of what he looks like? I mean, you wouldn't worship a creature that looks like this now, would you? No. Well, it's quite clear. Satan will not be coming at one with a pitchfork, but rather he will come to you with the themes in life that will relate to your everyday experience, your life, and the benefits and development of yourself and your society, doing what makes you feel good. In the Garden of Eden, when all things were created perfect, Satan came to Eve in a manner of beauty. For the serpent back then was a beautiful creature that even had wings and was able to walk. Other ancient deities praised the serpent because of such beauty it possessed. Satan came expressing to Eve the benefits of not obeying God, to do what makes you feel good, and to express that there will be no consequences of your actions in the manner of ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in that day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. In response, Satan received worship without Adam and Eve even knowing about it. For Adam and Eve obeyed the voice of the serpent. Holy, sinless, perfect in righteousness human beings chose the voice of the one who was to bring about death, destruction, turmoil, famine, and all the evil and disasters we see today. The scenes which atheism blames God for when it was all part of the devil's plan. And this is no surprise, for the quote we read tells us that this is going to happen just before the closing scenes of this world. This is why, as we approach the close of time, when Satan is to work with greatest power to deceive and destroy, he spreads everywhere the belief that he does not exist. It is his policy to conceal himself and his manner of working. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. And so as we see the characteristics of the devil in its fullest unrighteous glory, we are not to be surprised when the Bible tells us that the beast in Revelation chapter 13 causes the whole world to worship him and to glorify him, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? For this power will do the same, deceive the whole world." We continue. "And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven." In part 1, we established that speaking words against was the same as speaking words of blasphemy, or placing yourself in a position or making yourself better than the one that you are blaspheming against. But what about this 42 months? Because according to the biblical account, 42 months is the time that this power had time to do what it had to do. Let's do the maths. If 12 months is 1 year, and 12 times 3 is 36, that means we have 3 years, which is 36 months. Now we're told it is 42 months, so how much months do we have left from the 36 that we've already counted? We have 6 months left, and we know 6 months is half a year. So as we put all of this together, we have 3.5 years. Did we not read something similar in Daniel chapter 7 when we watched it in part 1? "And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times," which is 3.5 years. And so by now I believe we all know what power this is referring to, but let us look at the last identifying mark which is expressed in this verse, that being, "they shall be given into his hands." We identified in this verse that this related to the time when the papal church persecuted and overcame the saints of God, who did not listen to the papal dogma and went by the Bible and the Bible alone. During this time, over 50+ million Christians and people were killed, persecuted for the faith that they had during the course of 1,260 years. This is why the next verse in Revelation 13 says, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given over all kindreds and tongues and nations." And so you probably come to the conclusion by now, for the beast in Revelation chapter 13 holds all these characteristics of the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. And as I mentioned how one prophet opens a prophecy, there is another who was raised up to announce the fulfillment of the prophecy, and that being John in Revelation chapter 13. For John in Revelation 13 is repeating and enlarging the prophecy of Daniel chapter 7. But there is something we must understand as we continue to head into our time. What does the Bible express about the beginning and the end of the 1,260 years? How do we know this period is biblical for the time of the papal rule? And what does it mean that it received a deadly wound? According to the image of Daniel chapter 2, Rome was in power at the time when John was writing his revelation. During the Roman rule, as it counted down, there was a time when the papacy was to receive its power and its seat and great authority so it can be in full power. When was this? Notice the facts. When Constantine moved his capital to Constantinople, the Pope inherited the power, prestige, and even titles of the Roman emperors. The most significant of all titles is Pontifex Maximus, a pagan title that means bridge builder between heaven and earth. After Constantine, his son Constantius came into power. In an effort to unite the various factions of the church, he forced anti-Nicene doctrines on the church, saying, whatever I will shall be regarded as canon. Constantius also tried to eliminate some pagan practices from his empire. In 356 AD, he decreed the closure of all pagan temples. However, the decree did not stop the rituals from continuing in Rome. Constantius' cousin Julian became the next emperor. A pagan, he tried to revert the empire to its pre-Christian pagan practices and the worship of Helios and Mithra. Following the reign of Julian was an era of emperors who practiced some form of Christianity, but remained most tolerant to the heresies and twisted doctrines that prevailed in their empire. In 538 AD, the Emperor Justinian issued a decree proclaiming the Pope to be supreme in religious matters. Since then, the Pope has assumed the garb of representative of Jesus Christ on earth. And so, since 538 AD, the papacy had the power to do as it will with the backing of the pagan Roman Empire of Justinian in its pocket. And so the starting time of our 1206-year prophecy starts in the year 538 AD, where it transitioned from Rome to the papacy. Everything mentioned about persecuting the saints, power over the world, teaching its own heresies, and the time it is to reign started in 538 AD. But with this understanding, we are told something very important. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. The saints who were murdered by the papacy, persecuted and killed, were listed as patient saints, for they patiently endured the persecution, the time of their trouble, and held on to the faith in the word of God while their lives were in jeopardy. Just like Jesus Christ, who endured the time of his trouble, he endured hardship, persecution, temptation, and even the cross, just so that he could cling to the joy that was set before him, knowing that if we would just accept his sacrifice, we too would have the chance of eternal life with him. Just as it was in the beginning, there was no sin, but perfect unity between God and his people. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight, and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. The joy that was set before him. I say unto you, that likewise joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth. That same joy is the joy placed in the hearts of those who suffered greatly for the faith during that time, the papal reign, for the truth that we are able to be partakers of, even for the Bible that we have today, through the labours and sacrifices of individuals like John Wycliffe and William Tyndale, who translated the Bible into English, who was strangled, burned at the stake, and killed with the last dying words for the purpose of the Bible being given to the people.
Lord, open the King of England's eyes.
But the time of the papacy was not to last forever, for there was to be issued a deadly wound, and the captivity that it led people to go in, it would also be in captivity itself. In other words, its power was to come to an end. When did this happen? Well, as we remember the 1260 years, 538 AD was when it was given power, which is to start the 1260-year time period. So we simply need to add 1260 years to 538, which brings us to 17 98. So according to the waymarks of Bible prophecy all the way from the time of Daniel, we are to see this date happen in fulfillment of prophecy, that being the papacy losing its power. Did it happen? In 1796, French Republican troops under the command of Napoleon invaded Italy, defeated the papal troops and occupied Ancona and Loreto. Pope Pius sued for peace, which was granted at Tolentino on February 19, 1797. But on December the 28th of that year, in a riot blamed by papal forces on some Italian and French revolutionists, the popular brigadier General Mathurin Leonardo de Fort, who had gone to Rome with Joseph Bonaparte as part of the French embassy, was killed, and the next pretext was furnished for invasion. General Berthier marched to Rome, entered in unopposed on February the 10th, 1798, and proclaiming a Roman Republic, demanded of the Pope to renunciation of his temporal power. Upon his refusal, he was taken prisoner, and on February 20 was escorted from Vatican to Siena, and thence to Certosa near Florence. The French declaration of war against Tuscany led to his removal by way of Parma, where he died 6 weeks after his arrival on the 29th of August 1799, having then reigned longer than any pope. The Bible tells us, my friends, there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. And so as we come to a close in this part, we see the necessity of allowing the prophetic histories to show us that the time of the stone is soon to come. For Babylon has passed, Media Persia has passed, Greece has passed, pagan Rome has passed, the papacy's rule has passed since 1798, but church and state has not come to pass yet. And so what is next to come? The Bible expresses that another beast is to rise, which affects all of us together and brings about church and state. The beast that is to resume the power lost by the first beast, and once again bring worship to the dragon and heal the deadly wound of the first beast, the papacy. That is the second beast of Revelation chapter 13. Who is this beast? What is this beast? And how does that affect us today? Let's find out as the Bible begins to enlarge this portion of the prophecy.